I'm Nicole Holcomb, attorney by day and podcaster by night, a former educator, school counselor, and administrator, and mom to a 9-year-old daughter with dyslexia, who loves all things Harry Potter, Minecraft, and science. A few years ago, she was identified with dyslexia, and our life seemed to turn upside down for a while, quite literally. I created the Dyslexia Mom Life podcast to help you navigate the upside down journey of dyslexia. You got this. If you're wanting to thrive as a mom in this dyslexia journey, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Well, today on the show, I have an amazing opportunity to talk to Nathaniel Shortall. He is one of what I like to call our dyslexic voices, who is going to share some experiences that he has had, and then now how he is giving back to the dyslexia community. And I'm so excited that I was able to connect with Nathaniel through Carl, an earlier interview we had in June. And so welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, if you don't mind, before we talk a little bit more about your story, do you mind just giving maybe a little bit of an intro and background just to kind of set the stage as to maybe I'm a college student, like just a little bit of background before we talk more about your journey, but just to kind of set the stage a little bit for everybody.
Of course. Right now, I am a senior at Emmanuel College, which is in Boston. It's about a 3-4 minute walk from Fenway Park. I'm home this semester. I just appreciate online college a little bit more than others. But right now I am majoring in communications. I'm double majoring, one in communications, one in criminal justice. So I graduate this May 22nd actually is commencement. So I'm just putting together all my papers for senior seminar and everything.
Well, congratulations. That's amazing.
So
and I know that feels good to be on the end of that journey as well.
yeah, it's been an uphill battle. And then after that, I am ready to take the Massachusetts Civil Service test. So I'm hoping to go on the Massachusetts State Police when I am all said and done with my career and ride that out for 25 to 30 years. So.
All right. Okay. Well, it's good for you to bring us up to speed on where you are. I know today we're going to talk a little bit about Kildonian and the Dunnebeck camp and your involvement there because I'm excited to talk too about the fact that you're going to be going back to Dunnebeck this summer and working as a counselor. By the time this airs, you are probably going to be at camp because we're going to air this a little bit later than we're recording it. However, that piece of the journey I think is very important to share as well. But before we get there, do you mind just sharing a little bit with me about, maybe from your perspective, when I don't know anything about your story at this point, let me just say that to everybody. So if you don't mind sharing a little bit about, how did you learn about the fact that you were a student with dyslexia? How did you react to that? And then maybe kind of talk a little bit about that beginning piece, and then we can kind of transition into the opportunity to go to Kildonian.
Yeah. So my whole beginning of struggling with school started in kindergarten. So initially my mother enrolled me at a Catholic school in the area, and I was there at kindergarten. And I remember just the simplest things being extremely difficult for me, like comprehending, like even drawing or reading and spelling. And I was always waiting, because at that point, everyone's starting to learn how to read, go over different words and different spelling. And how they kind of put it to me, it's just like one day you're going to wake up and it's like, boom, you're going to figure it out. You're going to be able to read. And I was like, oh, I was so excited for it. And it never happened for me. I was just like, all right, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And that's when some of the teachers there went to my mom and just, I think he might have some form of a learning disability. So my mom ended up taking me out of that parochial school because they weren't going to be able to help me with my needs. So I went back to my public school and still struggled in classes, probably for second grade. And then nothing really transitioned until probably third grade, where I started getting pulled out for small groups of children who also had learning disabilities. And I did that probably through seventh grade. That was extremely difficult to be pulled out of class because you had friends in there, and I was a pretty social kid. I played sports. So my friends were like, why's Nathaniel leaving literature? Why is he going into the special needs room? And it really affected my overall confidence, because public schools don't treat students with learning disabilities they try all one shoe fits all. And it really brought down my confidence because everyone in that class varied in learning differences. Some children in the class had autism, Asperger's, dyslexia. Some kids just had ADHD, and it kind of puts you in that group. You're like, oh wow, like am I really this bad at school that I need to be in a completely separate room from my friends? And just the struggling. I remember, coming home every night and, looking over my homework and just waiting for my mom to come. Or when I would do spelling, when my mom works late, so I would do spelling. I call my grandma, I'd be like, how do you spell this word? To write down 3 times, and she would spell them off for me once, and then I would go through and continue on it. It probably wasn't until 6th grade we moved in our same town to go to the northern school here because my younger brother is deaf, so they had a better program for him there. And it wasn't until I had a special ed teacher named Mrs. Kiley who kind of saw what I was struggling with, and she went out of the way, kind of broke protocol and spoke to my mom and said, he's too bright to be struggling with this. And my mom kind of got the ball rolling then, and I met with a diagnostician, and we opened up a whole lawsuit against my town, and we were going through it. And at that point, I was too old for the Carroll School in Massachusetts, which was also specialized as on Orton Gillingham. And it was really nervous for my mom because all these schools that they were saying were pretty far away. My mom was pretty set, like, oh, he'll just go to like the landmark school. But after I had my diagnostician, she said the proper way for me to learn is the Orton Gillingham way, which Dr. Orton, Dr. Gillingham both discovered dyslexia. It's more of the base that all the other styles of teaching go off of. And she said there are 3 schools that we could look at. There's one in New York, which was Kildonan. There's one in Colorado, and there was one, I believe, in Hawaii. And my mom didn't want me to leave home at all at such a young age. So we kind of settled on the New York school and went through that process for a couple of years.
So what grade are you in at this point?
When I was finishing all that up, I was about a 7th grader in middle school.
So let me ask you a quick question before we go there. So up until that time, I know now, as an adult, you're looking back, but at the time that these things were happening, were you very involved in that process, or are these just things you're remembering that your mom has shared with you later on, or were you very, because I always wonder, for example, my daughter's a 4th grader, and I always wonder, she shares some things with me, but I just wonder from her perspective, I mean, even back when you were in elementary and middle school, were you understanding what was going on around you as far as, the differences? And, I know you shared that it was quite different in the class because, you were being pulled out of class, and obviously you knew something was different, but you didn't quite fit in with everybody in the box in that other class either, right? Because you were different because you were dyslexic. Yeah. And so I'm just curious at that point, kind of what you remember from that experience, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember knowing that it wasn't for me. I remember knowing that I never felt any improvement, but I never felt that I was stupid. I always knew I was mature for my age or had high intellect on things that really interest me, and I would go out of the way to figure stuff out. But
so you were finding some successes in other places, things that you had passions for.
Things external, sports, music, things that I took extreme interest in, and would get wealth of knowledge from watching movies or listening to interviews. So I knew that it wasn't an intellectual thing.
But you also had those hurdles of trying to constantly explain that to your peers, especially as you get older. In middle school, students are very inquisitive as to why are they doing something different than what I'm doing. And I imagine that was another layer of things that you had to go through as well.
The thing that was probably the hardest for me to hurdle, and that didn't stop until I probably got to Kildonan, was that as being in another room with kids that had more severe learning disabilities, it made me treat my dyslexia less than just a slight learning disability, it's still learning disability, but something more severe. So I started to think that I had more issues, that maybe people aren't telling me things, like maybe, am I on the spectrum? Am I not? And I would always have to fight with that internally because, my mom would say one thing to me like, oh no, you just have this, but no,
I wondered.
My mom's going to tell me I look handsome on my ugliest day, so I'm never going to believe her.
Right.
But that was a big hurdle for me to overcome. Just a lot of confidence in myself in the classroom, and especially, I remember being nervous even in college when we would have to go around and read little paragraphs. I'm like sweating in my chair. I'm like, I hope they know I can't do this. Like,
right.
But, No, even going into transitioning into a specialized school, my mom was very open with me about the whole process. She wanted me to be part of the decision. She had me meet with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I knew everything that was going on. I had to keep it hush hush from my friends because I didn't know if I didn't want to tell people I'm going to New York and then have it fall through, then look like a liar.
Sure.
But I also didn't want to not tell them. Then next school year, they're like, "Where's Nathaniel?
Where did he go?" Yeah. So at this point, when you're looking at these other schools, are these all boarding schools or are these day schools? Just so people have a reference of what your family's looking at this point.
Yeah, so where I was aged out of the Carroll School, I believe the Carroll School's in Cambridge, Mass. So that would have been a day option. But at that point, everything
It was
was
like
a
K8,
stay away
K8.
school.
Yeah.
Either, if I was Landmark, I was going to be there for a week, come home on weekends. But when I went to Kildone, and I was there full time.
Mm-hmm.
I lived there, showered there, everything there. So that was a big adjustment. And I think going to camp really helped, going there in the summer and meeting people and getting adjusted to living away from home in the summer.
Had you been, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. So had you been going to some of the Dunnebeck camps prior to the school?
No, I only
okay.
went to the initial camp prior to my going into Kildone in the 8th grade. So the summer of 7th into 8th, I was at Dunnebeck going in.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So how do you recall how you kind of narrowed it down to, Dunnebeck and Kildonian was going to be the best option for your family? Do you remember that conversation, or do you remember how y'all kind of landed on this looks like the best option for you at this point?
Well, they were just the best school around that taught Orton Gillingham, and that's what I needed. So that's where I just needed to go. There was really, after I found out it was Kildone, there was really no other option. There was this way or the highway. Because they were the only school that could teach me the way that I needed to be taught. And so it was just kind of settled.
Because at this point, you're going into middle school, preparing for high school. And so you're on a different, let's say, path as to maybe a student that was, early elementary or even later elementary. Because it seems like, too, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. And so a lot of our schools, actually all of our schools are centered around 1st grade through 8th grade. And it's more of a immersion school transition. You go in for a few years for Orton Gillingham, and then you transition out and they help you with placement into, another private school or public school. We don't have any, boarding schools in our area, but there's no really middle and high school options here other than going into a private school that is very dyslexia friendly, that, has a strong transition program. So I'm always very fascinated by these other options. And it sounds like, you're a student that's the place that you and your mom really realized this is not working. So I've got to have a better option. And so it makes sense that you were looking for what are those options in your area or even, possible area that would be able to help you through Orton Gillingham at that age.
And it was the big explain to me was, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the right, I believe it's called the right law, that it says that if you can't provide at the school the exact program this student needs, you have to find a school that provides it and have them go there. So that's kind of the whole basis of how we got to Kildone, because nothing there. They couldn't bring in an Orton Gillingham tutor. They couldn't do that. There was no one around there that was trained in it. A lot of these people who taught the special ed courses were young, very young teachers, students that had either just gotten out of college, that didn't even have their master's yet. They were still learning how to teach, let alone teach someone with a learning disability.
Right. And dyslexia is so specific on how a dyslexic needs to be taught. That's a whole nother layer when you've got numerous students in your classroom with different and various disabilities that need to be taught. Dyslexia is so unique to that, I think, as far as the method that needs to be used. And you have to be a master of that from a teaching perspective to be able to really make a difference for a student with dyslexia. So I completely get that as well. So
and they did such a good job with that at Kildone, because even just being dyslexic, different people have different strengths and weaknesses within their dyslexia.
Absolutely.
And they were so good at, pairing you up with the right teacher that if they see in a test that, all right, he needs more comprehension skills. Well, this tutor's really good at that. So they did a real good job at pairing you to the specific needs that you needed to focus on for that school year to improve, and then reevaluate and then move forward on other.
So let me ask you this. So you kind of alluded a little bit, but didn't really say it. So as far as going to, you went to the camp and then you started the school and that next fall, Was that something that your public school paid for, or was that a private family expense?
That was through through my public school, through a public lawsuit against them, and we ended up winning in the end, and I was able to go to Kildonan for 5 years after that. Yeah.
Okay. And so, looking back now as a senior in college, do you feel like that was really a turning point? I mean, did that make a complete difference in where you are today?
It's kind of a love-hate relationship with where I am today. Because when I went into Kildonan, they had to do so much to catch me up that I lost what I needed to be learning at that point. Like, we're in college, I had a big wake me up of, I'm not as good of a writer as I thought I was, because I was so focused on learning how to read and write better, all these fundamental things that my friends learned way before me. I'm just now catching up, and now there's another catch up to being at a college level.
Right.
But that was a huge turning point, because I'm not sure how my life would have gone without Kildonan. I give them praise for making me the person I am today, because it changed me forever. Being able to know how to read and all those different, milestones, and especially confidence, just believing in myself, changed me. In school, I was very angry. I was angry that I didn't know how to read. I was angry that my handwriting was terrible, that I couldn't do what my friends were doing. And to be able to then go there and do that, I became happier. I made friends, and it was a completely different feeling. So that was
so if you were comparing, I mean, obviously you had been in a couple of different school settings up until then, but when you're comparing your early middle school to your late middle school, for people that aren't as familiar with programs like this, what did a typical day look like? How was it different than a public school or a different private school? What made that particular school unique?
I think just for me, the big thing that made it unique was living there. That you would wake up, the teacher who lived at school would wake you up. You would have to, get ready for your day. You have to, throw on a suit, throw on like a tie and everything. The biggest difference that I noticed was just the class sizes, because Kildonan was such a small school that I forget how many kids were there with me in the 8th grade. I want to say maybe 12.
Oh, wow.
But it was a very small thing. So that was a big transition of, all right, like, this is small, this is meeting everyone, I don't know anyone. And it was a lot more, my whole day was structured, let alone just my school time. When I wake up, when I eat, when I go to school, when I do my homework, when I go to bed. And that really helped me as an individual, having that structure and thriving off of that daily plan. So that was the biggest difference I noticed right off the bat when I switched from public into Kildonan school.
And then as far as your remediation or your reading, tutoring or writing, was that like a dedicated class, or was that more like a supplemental tutoring that you did after your day, or was it built into your day, or what did that look like?
So, they had regular math, science, all this other classes, but I remember it was first period of my 8th grade year, I had a tutor there named Ula Zolette, and she was married to the dean of students, Brian Zolette, at the time at Kildonan. And I remember we'd go in every day. I would start off by learning cursive. So Diana King, the founder of Kildonan, believed that students with dyslexia, especially me who has severe dysgraphia, that the motion of keeping the pencil or pen on the paper is easier for you to do. So I remember every day I would come in, I'd write the entire alphabet, lower and uppercase, and then I would write the words that I am spelling words that I've been working on prior. There was some textbook stuff that we would go over, just learning how to read, the flashcards, the A, apple, all that traditional stuff. And we would go over, reading and just, basic, focused on the Orton Gillingham teaching of it. So that was I want to say you did that for about an hour to an hour and a half every day. And then all the other teachers, that worked at the school all had to learn the same style of Orton Gillingham. So my tutor knows how to teach Orton Gillingham. So does my math teacher, even though he doesn't have a one-on-one setting with me. he knows exactly what we need to be doing and how to explain it in a different way and how to break it down in a way that's helpful to us, which was huge. Knowing that everyone there was on the same page, they knew the same way to teach. That made the transitioning into other classes seamless because everyone was on the same page of how to teach and how these students learn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And then what were some of the other activities that they did to reinforce some of those pieces? Were there other, like, let's say you needed help in a particular thing. Was there also additional tutoring that you could take advantage of? Or do you have an advisor or somebody that worked with you, a counselor or somebody that would kind of help you identify if there were other areas that you needed to work in? Or how did that kind of work?
I think it was really based off of, your tutor and what they think your needs are, and then they could focus on different things with you. Because where it's a one-on-one individual thing, there's really no daily agenda. If there's an issue, we could focus on that issue, and we just attack what we need to attack. And even outside of class, when we would do homework, we would have a study hall, and in that study hall, there's always a proctor that is Orton Gillingham trained there. That if I had a question on spelling or reading or any problem, they were able to come over and give me that assistance. So the ability to get help there was constant because the people who lived in the dorms are also the same people that taught you. So if I had any form of question, I could go up to any teacher, any staff member, ask them the question and get an instant answer.
Wow.
So that was the extreme benefit there, knowing that, on my dorm hall freshman year, we actually had a tutor who unfortunately just passed away this year. It's a phenomenal man named Tim Heaton. And if I had a question about reading or anything, I could just go to Tim. And Tim was probably one of the best tutors that had ever touched Kildare. He was the nicest soul in the world, never raised his voice. He was just a great guy. So I knew, like, having someone like him and all the other people that lived in the dorm, that I could go to them constantly if I have a question, or even just knowing more about Orton Gillingham. Knowing more about how they're training it, the styling of it, why it works. So that help was always there whenever I needed it, which was awesome.
And did you stay there through the time that you graduated high school?
Yeah, I stayed there from the summer camp all the way to my senior year. I'd come home, for breaks and the occasional weekends, but I was there full time.
Yeah. And how do you feel like, or did you, now that you're a senior in college, do you feel like you picked up some techniques as far as how you best study, how you best because you talked about structuring your day as far as they structured it for you, but you probably also learned when you do best study, as far as is it the morning, is it in the evening? I mean, did you learn some things along the way, or did they help you learn some things along the way that you feel like, this probably did help me in college? Because although there was that gap in knowledge that you obviously still had, did you have some skill set, though, that you were able to take into college that you feel like has been a benefit?
They took away the embarrassment of saying you are dyslexic. They of course they sent me there with this paperwork, go, and I'm fortunate. I have the disability workers at Emmanuel are world class. But they taught me how to be confident with it. Every year, even from freshman year all the way up to my senior year now, for end of first day, I always go up to my professor. Hi, my name is Nathaniel. I'm dyslexic. And I use different programs there. There's a program at my school called ARC that my school is, just go get help. Go, if you're writing a paper, go see these people. They're filled with professional writing people and other students who have successfully taken that class. So I'm there constantly when I was at school getting help on homeworks and all this and that. So I did take on that one-on-one, like, all right, I'm going to need someone to explain this to me more than just a professor, because granted, my professors are great. The one knock I have on college is, for example, I took a political science class my freshman year. Taught by a doctor named Adam Silver. Adam was a phenomenal professor, but the big thing that hurts, I think, students with learning disabilities in colleges, none of those professors are specialized in education. He went to Albany College and got his degree in political science. He has done nothing to know how to teach, especially nothing to know how to teach students with learning disabilities. So that was the big transition, because, I think a lot of my professors will nod and say what they know what dyslexia is, but they don't know what dyslexia is.
Right.
And I think that was a big turning point for me, realizing, oh, it's back to some people don't know what it is. And these people don't even know how to teach properly. It's just PowerPoint slides. And, the tools I took from Kildona is advocating for yourself. You have to put in 1,000 times more work and use the resources that you can. I think, kids who do fail that leave that structure don't realize that they need this help. Don't realize that they still need to go and get help from a peer, because like for me the biggest problem was writing. I can type, I can think of a topic and go for hours. I'm not good at reading, so I can't even read my own work to know how to spell check or anything. So it was great taking my paper, going down. I remember I submitted a paper that I didn't edit and I got maybe a 78 on it, and I wasn't happy with that. And I took it down, and the person who ended up becoming my friend, Jameson O'Sullivan at the school, who's a writing person. I go down and she's like, oh, you didn't add a comma here, you misspelled this, you did that. And, she's checking off, and we'll go through and type it on my computer, and I ended up getting an 88 on the paper. So I realized that there are things there that I could just go and use to help me succeed. And I probably wouldn't have done that if I wasn't taught those tools and how to advocate for myself through Kildona.
Right. That makes perfect sense. And too, just kind of taking that wall down, that we all have things that we don't do well. Everybody does. And, some of us have a big pride to ask for help when we just can't do it all. And identifying those people that can help us be better at what we're doing, then that's it. That's a huge skill that there are lots of adults that can't do. So, the fact that you have that and you're able to identify, okay, this is an area where I could improve in, or this is an area where I need to find someone to be on my team to help me out with this piece, then I think that's, a great skill to have as young as you still are. So let's talk a little bit about Dunnebeck Camp. So I got the opportunity to interview Carl, and he's amazing at the camp. And I understand that you're going to be working there this summer, that you're going to go back as a counselor. What led you to do that?
Well, I reached out to Carl last year to go back and do it. And unfortunately, camp got canceled due to the pandemic. But it was around this time that I got this like niche in my stomach that I'm like, I have to at one point give back. I need to give back to that community, Kildonan or Dunnebeck. And unfortunately, the Kildonan school did close. So I knew that realm wasn't going to be there. And the main purpose for me doing this is I had some amazing faculty members at Kildonan that changed my life. My tutors like Jim Scribner and Tom Brown really molded me into the man that I became. I grew up without a father figure, and going there, these guys stepped up to a point. They didn't have to, but they did. And that's something that I want to give back to those kids. Be a positive role model, someone that has done it, someone that can, especially having dyslexia, being able to actually feel, know the empathy, know that I feel what you're feeling, and you can do this. You're going to have to work 100 times more than your peers, but you are not incapable of anything. And that's really why I want to go back, is to change these kids' lives, not in the tutoring way, but more in the mentor way, and showing them that you can do it even though you don't feel like you can. And that's the main reason I want to go back. And remember, I love the community. That's probably the best thing Kildona and Dunnebeck does, is they build a phenomenal community. And it's great because all these kids are also, it's just dyslexics. You're with people of your own kind, and parentheses that.
Do you find that students go back there? Like, let's say a student goes this summer. Do you find that students go back summer after summer within that age group until they age out, as far as making those friendships? Or do some people just come for one summer and that's it? I mean, what has been your experience with
Well,
campers?
I can only base off my one summer at camp. So I'm not 100% sure what the repeat is. I believe that when I went there were a couple of kids there were a few, more than a couple, that were many years there.
Yeah.
I say more so in Kildonan. Out of the 8th grade class that I was with, the 12, only me and one other student made it to our senior year. And then we picked up people along the way. I say probably 9th grade, it was more of a solid group. But there was always flip-flopping of people coming around the world, and it was expensive at the time. But I think when you see, as a parent, when you see that improvement,
Mm-hmm.
why not send them back?
Right.
Why not keep doing this? If they enjoy, because it's fun. Yeah, you have to do tutoring, but you make these friends and you do this, and it's a great time. So if you see that improvement and your child come back with this confidence and being able to read, you're not going to want to lose that.
Yeah.
They're going to go into the school year like a skyrocket. You don't want them to go over the summer and not work on their skills.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as a parent, they all should have gone back.
Yeah. With the
So
school experience and the camp experience, what we didn't talk about this a moment ago, but it just hit me when you said that. What do you feel like they did right as far as some of the, some of the I'm trying to think the best way to say this. Some of the pieces as far as providing opportunities for you to continue with things that were your strengths, like athletics or music or art. Did they also infuse that into the day or opportunities outside of classes to be able to continue, those pieces that made you, a well-rounded individual going forward?
yeah, so I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I was a big pioneer of getting things at Kildonan. So I came in playing I've learned guitar. I'm very talented at many instruments, and I didn't want to lose that. So I talked to briefly the headmaster before I got there, Ben Powers, about how I don't want to stop playing. And I was able to come to school, and fortunately I had another student there named Trey Sowers who knew how to play the drums. So they ended up bringing in a former Rochester cop named Dan Ball, and he started this music program, and it elevated from us being in the basement of the girls' dorm to it was its own curriculum. And we got to meet some awesome people through that. They brought in, and Kildonan was great about when they saw something working, they brought in the best. They brought in a guy that really blew up the program. His name was Michael Clavana, and he is a phenomenal individual. He's done sound design. He's worked with the top artists. I remember me and him had a great relationship. He ended up taking me and my mom to Billy Joel, where he was working. So they really threw that all over us. Like, yeah, come on, you guys, we see the improvement in this. We see the confidence. All right, they gave us a whole music program. And then they offered other things like, I did soccer in the fall. And there was after school, you had a guy, you had to do a sport. But the thing that they did the best at formed the community was we lacked the PE time. So in the winter, every Thursday, we would take the day off and we would go, everyone had to learn how to either ski or snowboard. So every Thursday we would go to a ski mountain and you would learn how to ski or snowboard. And we did that every Thursday. Then we didn't have February break, but we would go up to Killington, Vermont and ski for a week. So I think that's what really brought everyone together, was everyone had that love of, yeah, I remember when I couldn't do that. Oh yeah, then you get good, and it made my friendships better. So they did all this other stuff to build you in athletics and all this and that. But even on the weekends, they would take us to the mall. We would go to the movies, aquariums, New York City, anywhere you wanted to go. They'd be like, we could put this trip together. If there's enough kids, you guys can go. And they let us lead normal lives outside of that. And even at the end of my reign, my senior year tutor, Tom Brown, he was a Taekwondo instructor. So I told him that this is something I wanted to do. And me and my three friends, Sal Agnello, Trey Matthews, and Jacob O'Sullivan, just started going. We had cars on campus, so we would pack up our things, take a 45-minute drive, go to do Taekwondo for 3 hours, come back, shower, get our homework done. And if we had interest in it, they let us do it. Anything that helped us deal with stress or come out of our shells anymore, we had the opportunity to do something like that if we so choose.
Yeah, that's great that you were able to still do those other things as well and find interest, while you were there as well, and continue to foster those and continue to work in those areas, like you said, of music and other things that you were able to experience, and soccer and things. Let me ask you this. So we talked a little bit off air, but one of the things I always ask people, and I think your perspective will be very enlightening for many moms, is that many moms who are finding the podcast and are listening and kind of following along, they're pretty early on in their journey. So if you can imagine elementary, probably, it's kind of a wide range. I have some people that have really young kids, kindergarten, first, second, then I have some that are kind of more, older elementary, some in middle and high, but majority of them are in elementary or just starting to figure out my child is continuing to struggle. Same kind of things, being told it'll just click, it'll just happen, and it doesn't. And then they finally come to the realization, I think my child's dyslexic, and they find the podcast. And so they're either just really starting to figure out and putting the pieces together, or they've put the pieces together. They know their child's dyslexic and they're trying to put interventions in place. I say all that to say, for moms that are really just kind of at the beginning of their journey, the first couple of years, what advice would you give them from your perspective? I mean, from a student's perspective, from a child's perspective, what does a mom need to hear? What does she need to do to best help her child? I know everybody's individual and unique, and so it's hard to say for sure, not knowing what all other pieces of the pie may be going on with that child, but just from a kind of a broad spectrum of, you've been in that world, how it feels, what do you wish your mom had heard back then?
I think get something going as soon as you can. And I don't think I need to tell moms this, but do whatever it takes to get your child the best opportunity they can to succeed. And I know mothers are like that instinctively, but, I know that there could be, financial issues, or like these programs are far away. It's going to be the best for your child. And as soon as you can get help for them, the faster they catch up and the faster they can go on to be themselves. I believe most children with dyslexia, tend to see at an early age are boys, but I think if you have a young daughter, really be on the lookout for it, because girls hide it extremely well. I think of a friend of mine from Kildare. Her name was Courtney Jones. And I believe she came in 10th grade, but she was able to hide her dyslexia very well and cope with it and just work harder. Because she didn't want to, stand out. She wanted to, live a normal life in a sense. So you really have to, especially girls, you have to look at the little niche, see if it's taking them a little longer, and just, go get the proper help. Go see a diagnostician, see what the best way for your dyslexia, your child with a learning disability needs, and then get them that, because that's the only way they're going to be able to come close to their full potential.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Nathaniel, so much for spending time with me today and sharing your story and your background. We so appreciate that. Is there anything else you want to share, or anything else you want me to know before we close out today? I do appreciate you being here.
No, I just, I'm excited to get back to the community. I hope this podcast helps some people. I look forward to listening it and sharing with my friends. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. And congratulations again on finishing up your college and having yet another milestone under your belt. I know that feels good. It's been, I'm sure, a long and difficult journey, but I'm so excited, and congratulations for that as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed the conversation myself. And thank you for being part of our community. We just recently celebrated our 1-year anniversary on the podcast, and it is hard to believe that we are now on episode 82 of the podcast. I want to thank you for listening. I would love to hear any feedback you have of episodes you would like to hear and guests you would like to hear in the future. And it would mean a lot if you would leave a review on Apple Podcast, if that's where you listen to your podcast at. It helps other moms to find the podcast and hear from moms who are listening and, hear your thoughts on the podcast. And remember, you got this. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll be back here real soon.